chair's more comfortable. Yes, I fall off this. Former colleagues here are taking up the mantle on school choice. So why don't we just start out by telling us what we can expect in terms of legislation this year at the Capitol on school choice, and let's take it in any order you want to.
Well, I don't know about the rest of y'all because we're still in the process of bills being public, and so, but I've got several ESA bills myself, kind of I won't call it an omnibus, but one that encompasses a universal aspect. There are some triggers kind of like that you had before of income level, and then also I have some geographical as well, just to kind of, and then also a percentage of the entire student body population of the entire state, so that we'll know exactly how much to account for every budget year. That way it's not just a rampant run for people trying to get the vouchers. But and then also another issue of mine that I've done is a 4-day school week, so also a voucher for school districts if you're in a school district that has 4-day school weeks. That way you'll be able to use that if you don't want to use that. So.
All right. Well, I have two bills that's going to deal with choice. One is with public schools. I believe why should you be confined to any one district just because you live in that district's boundaries? So my first bill is going to deal with removing the district boundaries. In essence, if you live in one district but you want your child to attend school in a different district in a public school setting, you should be allowed to do that and move your child wherever you feel like is the best for that particular child. Second one deals with extracurricular activities. Many times parents and students have to give up playing football or being in the band or any other competition that OSSAA would have just because they made a choice of going to a virtual charter school or maybe some other charter school within a district. I don't think you should have to give up opportunities in athletics or other competitions like band and others. So the second one is going to open that up for any charter school to be allowed to participate in extracurricular activities within your district of residence. And so give parents more choice.
That's great. Well, I'm Representative Kevin Calvey from Northwest Oklahoma City and West Edmond, and I also am carrying a ESA bill, Education Savings Accounts bill. The language is a bit work in progress. It's actually modeled after a bill that former Representative Nelson introduced last year. So we're working on that. I like your concept about the boundaries, because if you think about it, how arbitrary is it that you have to go to school where you live? I mean, we're so used to it, but that's really an artificial construct. Why should politicians drawing artificial lines on a map decide where your kids go to school? It's just really, if you think about it, it's like the emperor has no clothes. It makes no sense. So why shouldn't we have more opportunities for people to go to school where they'd like?
Yes, Representative Chuck Strohm. I've taken a little bit different approach this year just because of the makeup of the Oklahoma House. As many of you may know, or perhaps you don't, we've got 25 new House members, and we really don't know where they stand on school choice. And so the two areas that I've really taken a different approach, rather than authoring school choice legislation, I've requested to be on both the Common Ed Policy Committee, and then I'm also vice chair on the Education A and B Committee. And so on the House side, just again, due to the nature of the makeup of the committees, I feel like I can be most effective to support school choice from the inside rather than authoring legislation that we know has a very strong chance of failing before it ever makes it on a committee.
Okay. I have to ask this. It's a serious question, but it might sound funny, but you guys can expound on it. But you're publicly, vocally supportive of educational choice for parents. I believe parents ought to be able to pick where their child is educated, how they're educated. What were you thinking when you did that? Why are you supportive of school choice? You're supportive of legislation, you voted for it, you've co-authored, you're helping write it or carrying legislation this year, you have for the last several years. How did you get to the point where you're supportive of school choice and continue to be in spite of some of the hostility that goes along with that.
Jason,
Go ahead.
let me answer that one, if I might explain exactly why I'm in favor of school choice. My worldview says that parents are responsible for training up their children. Parents are, not the state, not your neighbor, not a nanny. Parents are responsible from birth until they leave the home. And so if parents have that responsibility, then the parents should have the responsibility and the ability to be able to choose where they want their child to go to school. It's not, the state has a very important role to play, and that is to assist and to be a part of that, an assistance, a help with the parents in their choice of where to go to school and help to educate. But nowhere do I ever read, not even in our founding documents, that the state should take over the responsibility of educating our youth.
Yeah, from my perspective, it's really, I agree with Gary, it's a worldview. I like to think of it as a partnership. Really, the school, and regardless what school your children are in, whether you're homeschooled or private or public school, the school is really a partner with you to support both from an educational viewpoint as well as a worldview viewpoint. And so for myself, obviously you have to scratch your head and say, why the heck is Strohm here on the stage? Because you know that I support two very strong public school districts, and yet I also believe that parents are the most effective and should have the ability to choose where their student attends school. Those dollars are not, those dollars do not belong to any particular institution. Those dollars are paid for by the parents, and really the dollars should follow the child.
Okay.
Well, the thing that when I determined, and even before, because when I first ran in 2008, it was one of the central parts of my campaign. I've always believed in it. I'm a product of public and private school, both public in high school and elementary, and then public in undergrad, and also graduated from Georgetown University. So I've had a little bit of a perspective of both, and the way I look at it is, like Gary said, is, you know, the parents are the ultimate decision makers, and should be. But also, to me, it's also something to where those are the lower side of our community economically, it gives them a chance to go to a different school that they wouldn't be normally at. And so it gives them the opportunity that, you know, just because I live in Nichols Hills or War Acres and, you know, somewhere like that have good schools, it shouldn't be locked in just because that's the zip code. And for me, it's always been a matter of choice for that.
Well, I would echo everything that my colleagues have said up here. And I could give you an academic argument about liberty. I mean, why do I support freedom in education as well as in other things? Same reason our founders of our country, you know, went to great lengths and pledged their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor for freedom for our whole country. You're willing to make sacrifices when you believe in something. I'd like to really give you a little bit more kind of a concrete examples. Just yesterday, I had a friend of mine call me, and he lives in an area where it's not like the terrible part of town. It's not the best part of town, and he is worried about some of the bad stories he hears about going on at the public school in that area. And so he was wanting to move. And I said, well, you know, he had never even heard of charter schools, for instance. And he knew he didn't have the money to privately educate the kids. They don't feel comfortable homeschooling. So I will be getting him in touch with people that can show him alternatives to where he's going. And this is, when you see real people wanting a better life for their children and a better education system that's more consistent with their values and fits their family's schedule, everything else, why shouldn't that be the center of what we look at in education policy rather than the arbitrary things, what some bureaucrat wants to do with the school system? Are schools really are they really looking at the children that they're supposed to serve, or are they there to just perpetuate themselves? And that's a real question that I think we have to ask in not just education, but other areas of government. It comes down to real people with real problems that have an evident solution that is being held up by an entrenched bureaucracy. And that just, to me, I just love those kind of fights.
One of the things I found, we've all gone out and knocked a lot of doors, and Republican or Democrat, it seems to me, when the subject comes up with just the average person, somebody that's not hanging out at the Capitol or doesn't work for a school or isn't involved in the mix, and the issue comes up, are always kind of surprised that this is controversial. I think we all in here aren't that surprised, but the average parent or average voter, I think, is surprised it's controversial. What are the common objections to school choice that you as legislators hear from colleagues or constituents that are persistent, and how do you address those? And how can parents and supporters of school choice help you answer and address those questions or complaints or challenges or charges against school choice?
Sure. Probably the number one objection that I hear is that it's going to defund the public schools. That, without a doubt, that is the number one concern. The way that we answer that question is, I think Jason has said it best, that if you have a strong public school, it's extremely unlikely that you're going to have a large group of students that just leave that school. The students in public schools like the identity. They like a whole lot of things. So if you've got a well-run public school, you're not going to have a ton of students get pulled out. If you have a completely failing public school, there's a good chance that you're going to have a whole bunch of students that leave that school if a better...
Worked in a failing public school?
I didn't hear the question.
I never worked at a failing public school.
Well, let's let him answer the question.
So the question is the pushback is that if there are a bunch of students that leave a failing public school, the question we really need to step back and ask ourselves, if we had a business that was failing not just year after year or decade after decade, but generation after generation, to me that's a travesty. If we as a culture fail to educate a community generationally, then to me that's a failure of our society as a whole. And
one of the things that when I was in the House that was interesting, thank you. One of the things that I thought was interesting in the House is that a lot of times we're perceived as not supporting or being champions of the public school system, but I found that most of the time I had a lot more confidence in the public school system than those people opposing what I'm doing, because I don't think everybody's going to leave, and I think the Henry Scholarship proves that, where you have about 0.5% of the eligible students choose to use it, and it hasn't harmed anybody, or you read about it in the paper. So I don't think it's an attack on public education. That's not the way I think anybody that's hearing what we're saying is taking it. So Kevin or Gary or
well, yeah, and to that end, look, we have choice in most areas, even the areas that the government is involved in. We have, GI Bill and Pell Grants and all the student loans at the higher ed level, and yet people aren't, leaving public universities en masse to go to private schools, but they have that choice. And that ends up helping both the private institutions and the public institutions. We have that in people who are on assistance to get food stamps and things like that. We don't just have a government provider of food for those people that are getting that assistance. We have a multitude of choices that people have, and it makes all of them better because of the factor of competition. That's what will assist in these things, and it will help both public institutions and private institutions. There's no reason why that would not happen. In fact, there's every reason to believe it would happen. It happens this way where it's been done at the K through 12 level. It happens in other countries where it does that way, and stands to reason that it would happen everywhere else that we would try that. So why not inject what's already working everywhere else into this system and help all parents and for whatever kind of school they wish to choose.
For me, Jason, I was very grateful. I served on a school board for 8 years. It was a great training opportunity for me to learn really about just how a real good school operates and functions. We had like many other schools, some outstanding teachers, great curriculum, administrators who cared and supported teachers. But for me, when I was running for the board, it was kind of different in that I had one child in a public school, I had one child in a private school. And I had to ask myself, why would someone vote for me? I mean, really, if I got one of each. And it was very easy for me to answer my own question on that and share with others, and that's simply because the public school was doing outstanding for my son, really meeting my son's needs and encouraging him in his growth academically. My daughter was being best served in the private school. And so, and it rang true when I was on the board, in that the decisions we made, the board would always ask themselves, what is in the best interest of the students? So before we created some policy, we always would ask, now, how this might impact the teachers or how it might impact administrators. But the most important and the fundamental question of all questions was, is this in the best interest of the students? Well, I believe the same thing applies with our choice of schools. So for me, I've run legislation for the last 8 years on virtual, giving parents more opportunity on the virtual side. You might ask, well, yeah, but on virtual, why would a parent choose that? Well, a number of reasons. What if you have a child that feels bullied at school? They're not going to learn. If they feel intimidated in their local school, they're not going to learn. So give them an opportunity to still have a teacher at the other end of the computer, a certified Oklahoma teacher to help that student work through their programs. Or maybe they're like ADHD. A lot of those kids that are ADHD, they can hyper-focus on something, but if you put that student in just a normal classroom with all the stuff going on around them, they get distracted and they get in trouble. Let them put them in front of a computer and they get the work done. That's just who they are. So I think we really need to focus on what is in the best interest of all of the kids. There is no one size fits all. It doesn't exist. So allow the parents to choose what is in the best interest of their children and encourage everybody in the community to support one another, which is ultimately going to help our kids and help the future.
A lot of the big misnomers, and part of it, we're talking school choice, but also when we bring up charter schools as well, is that charter schools aren't public schools. And that's one of the biggest misnomers that I always try to correct people. Charter schools in Oklahoma are public schools. And even though it is an option for some, and a lot of times those have waiting lists, well, there's a reason, because it takes away a lot of the red tape and a lot of structure and gives them the license to do that. You take that and basically, in my mind, that's what ESAs and vouchers are, basically like an Uber of education, where the parent and the child get to determine where they go. They're not stuck to where, the train goes here to point A to point B. They get to go where they want to go as long as they become educated. And so that's one of the things that I think the focus needs to be on, as Gary mentioned, is the more we can focus more on the kids and not the institutions, because, and we talked about the brick and mortar part of it, our districts, and being arbitrary, were designed by how far a horse and buggy could go in a day in 1907. Well, is that the same standard that we want now? Why do we have 500? None of that makes any sense whatsoever. The infrastructure and systems that we have need to be completely revamped, and I think part of that first step is through charter schools and ESAs, and that way it helps the students from all across the state.
Very good. We probably just have time for one more question. How can parents help you, people that are supporters of school choice, whether they want it for their children or not, can respect the right of parents to make that decision? How can supporters of school choice, particularly parents, help you all in your efforts at the Capitol? The human interest story, of course, is part of that, but how can they help you, and how have you seen parents help you successfully so far, so that they have a better understanding of, now that session is beginning, how they can get engaged, which we need them to do right now.
If I may, I encourage them to tell their story. Tell their story. Before this meeting tonight, we had a time to have some dinner. And I was sitting at a table with a young lady who has one child at KIP and 2 children at a virtual school, Epic 101, and asked, well, why? Why is that? And out comes the story. And that the children weren't learning in the environment that they were in. One is now thriving at KIP, just thriving, and enjoys being there, learning. The other 2 are doing great for other reasons with a virtual setting. And it's amazing as parents share their story of how their choice, whatever that might have been, whether it's homeschool, charter school, public school, virtual school, whatever the choice is for them, and their kids, when they tell that story to others, it's not just sharing within their family, but share with others, share with legislators, because once legislators hear that those choices really are important, that it really is making a difference in a child's life. A child that was not interested in school, was feeling bullied in school, now they're in a different school and they're accepted, they have friends, and they're thriving. Legislators need to know that it made a difference. I think of the story, and we've all heard it, of the little boy walking down the beach on the sand, and all these starfish are everywhere, and he's throwing in starfish, and the old man comes up, what are you doing? He's throwing in starfish. I'm throwing in starfish, they're out here. Yeah, but you're wasting time, there's thousands of them. As he picks up one more and says, but that made a difference to that one. Your choice makes a difference to one child, it's worth fighting for.
Sure, I couldn't agree more that telling those human stories are out there. We can show statistics and things like that. We can show models from other states or other places where school choice is working, but recognize that the opposition to this is an entrenched bureaucracy, and they have a vested interest in keeping the status quo and not doing what parents would like. They also have an ability to generate, because they have a centralized control system, generate lots of emails to the Capitol in opposition to school choice. This last year, I was surprised at how many people actually did email us in favor of school choice, but there needs to be more. I mean, the polls show that the public is solid majority of the public in Oklahoma is behind school choice for it. But we need to hear more from that. It's harder when it's kind of pockets of people here and there, and they're not as easy to reach by one central, bureaucracy can reach out to their people and do that. But it's very, very important that you make your voice heard and do tell those stories. Rather than just say, I want you to vote for such and such bill, or I'm for school choice, say, I'm for school choice because of this. Right. Exactly what Senator Stanislawski was saying. Because my kid was being bullied, because my kid wasn't thriving in this environment, because I'm now able to go to a school that shares my values through my church, or whatever it is, that really is what makes school choice good for you. That's what you need to tell those stories. And legislators, will tend to remember those, but you have to reach them first. Also, the way you contact people, going up to the Capitol is the best way, not by far, and seeing people in person, particularly if they're your own legislators, but even legislators from other areas. After that, it would be phone calls, emails. All those are good too, but to the extent you can, actually get up there to the Capitol and visit with people one-on-one so they can see it. It creates a more visual memory in the mind. So that's what I would urge you to do, and be persistent. Don't just do it once a session. Do it multiple times throughout the session.
I'll interject real quick, but it's interesting because you think, well, you should only talk to your legislator from your district, and routinely we'll get hundreds of emails from people that don't live in our districts, and so I think all of you guys listen to who stops by to the extent you have time to do it, and you get the emails. So don't think because they're not your legislator you shouldn't talk to them. You should share your story with all legislators.
And to that end, I can tell you I've personally had conversations with some of our colleagues who privately have told us that they think school choice is the right thing to do, but they had more people call them in their district against it, and so they're going to vote against it. It makes a huge difference. So what we need to do is show what the polls all show is that a majority of the people in Oklahoma support school choice, and let that be seen in your voices.
Just one, I think that the visits to legislators are effective, but I've always enjoyed, and I try to have routine meetings in the district, like at a coffee shop, with just a group of people, and teachers sometimes, and administrators sometimes, but also just regular folk. And so sometimes that, to me, generates more people just coming out of the, not coming out of the woodwork, but they see that I'm there talking to people, and they want to come up and talk. And so most people sometimes get a little intimidated because coming to the Capitol isn't the easiest, and now with the reconstruction, it's not even easier anymore. But you know, finding us, it shouldn't be that difficult, and so it's definitely worth it on any issue, but definitely this one.
Yeah, two thoughts I want to leave with everyone. There's a misnomer that if we support school choice, that we're not supportive of public schools. That's false. I represent two world-class, phenomenal public schools, and I'm very proud to represent them. But if we want to see school choice pass in Oklahoma, it's a hard issue, guys. I mean, plain and simple. All the legislators, the conversations that we have at the Capitol, the people that come by, the people that we talk to in the district, in the end, you can tell where this issue is at the Capitol, and I believe, and I appreciate the forum to share this, I'm concerned that we're not going to see school choice in Oklahoma until we can share why it's going to bless and benefit the kids of Oklahoma. And we need to do that through a concerted media effort. We need to really have a really good way of sharing the stories of how our kiddos are impacted in a very positive way by having opportunity. That's really what we're doing, is we're providing opportunity for our kids. But in the end, it's not an intellectual argument. It's a heart argument. And until we can win the hearts and minds of the people of Oklahoma, the teachers, the other legislators that are waffling, they're not too sure, and they get a phone call that pushes them over to the no side, they need to understand that this is going to be good for the kids in their district. And so my encouragement is that let's get together, let's rally, and let's figure out how to make that happen.
All right.
Well, gentlemen, thank you very much for your service. Thank you for your support of school choice. Thank you for being here tonight. Thank you all.
Thank you. Well said. Yeah, you too. Thank you.